Russia's Rosneft-backed Nayara Energy slams EU sanctions as unjust. Vows 70,000 crore rupees investment in Indian downstream projects to safeguard energy security. Comptroller Auditor General flags 21.3 lakh crore rupees in uncollected taxes, exposes discrepancies in government's fiscal data and fiscal responsibility and budget management compliance. India's Employee Provident Fund Organization reports a record 20 lakh net member additions in May 2025, driven by youth hiring, rising female participation and pro-worker reforms under PM Modi government. Market regulator SEBI has lifted the trading ban on Jane Street after 4,843 crore rupees deposited in the escrow account. Air India Kochi-Mumbai flight skids on wet runway, while Indigo Goa-Indore flight reports landing gear snag in another incident. Air India Delhi-Kolkata flight aborts takeoff over technical issues. We tell you a list of recent flight mishaps across India. Air India has received 9 show-cause notices over 5 safety violations in 6 months. 71 aircraft damage in 2025 alone due to bird and animal strikes, says government in Rajya Sabha. And Bangladesh Air Force training aircraft crashes into school building, 27 killed, over 170 injured. Prime Minister Modi says India ready to extend all support. India and the United States are once again locked in a deadlock in their efforts to finalize a crucial bilateral trade agreement or BTA. Negotiations now in their 5th round ended inconclusively in Washington, with sources confirming talks are set to resume in Delhi in the 2nd week of August. The two nations are aiming to finalize a comprehensive bilateral trade agreement by the month of September or October this year. Now, driving the deadlock are disagreements over duties on auto components, steel and especially agricultural products. India's refusal to open up its dairy sector, which is a vital source of livelihood for over 80 million people, has set a firm boundary in the negotiations. India has made it clear that no deal will be signed unless national interests are protected. Now, this comes just days before the U.S. President's August 1st deadline for a pause on new tariffs expires. Now, without a trade pact, India could be staring at a staggering 26% duty hike on some exports. According to and adding to this pressure, the U.S. has warned of tariffs up to 500% on certain goods, though India has not yet received a formal notice. Moreover, President Trump has threatened sweeping new tariffs on imports from countries leaning towards de-dollarization, including BRICS members like India. He's also proposed the idea of 100% duties on Russian goods and hinted at secondary sanctions on nations buying Russian oil, India being the 2nd largest buyer. Now, while both sides insist that a deal is within reach, the road to a comprehensive trade pact remains uncertain. The next round of talks in August could decide whether India secures long-term trade security with Washington or faces a wave of tariffs in coming months. But in better news on trade and India's bilateral agreements with other nations, India and the United Kingdom are set to sign a major free trade agreement on July 24th. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will travel to London for the signing, and Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal will accompany him, this according to officials. Now, the two countries finished negotiations for this deal back in the month of May. The agreement is expected to boost trade between India and the UK to $120 billion by the year 2030. The trade pact will remove taxes on many Indian products like leather, footwear and clothes, making it easier for Indian businesses to sell in the United Kingdom. At the same time, it will also make imported items like British whisky and cars cheaper for Indian consumers. The Prime Minister's visit will last 4 days and also include a stop in the Maldives. His goal is to strengthen ties in trade, investment as well as defense. Remember, the UK and India have been negotiating this deal for over 3 years. It'll cut or remove taxes on 99% of Indian goods entering the UK. This includes clothing, frozen prawns, gems, jewelry and processed food. On the other hand, Britain will benefit from reduced tariffs on whisky and gin. Car imports will also become cheaper, with duties coming down from over 100% to just 10% under a quota system. This will help companies like Tata-owned JLR, which have operations in both the countries. Some Indian goods that will now enter the UK with zero tax include minerals, chemicals, textiles, metals, electronics, furniture, and even yoga and musical services. Now, the two sides have also agreed on a social security pact which will prevent Indian professionals working in the United Kingdom for short periods from paying into both Indian and British social security systems. This deal also supports digital services such as computer-related and engineering services. Talks for this deal began in early 2022 and included 14 rounds of discussions. However, the investment pact of the larger economic deal is still being discussed and has not yet been finalized. Russian oil major Rosneft-backed Nayara Energy has hit back at the European Union over recent sanctions, calling them unjustified, illegal and a threat to India's energy security. The company, which operates one of India's largest private oil refineries in Gujarat and a vast fuel retail network, says the EU's unilateral move undermines sovereignty and risks disrupting fuel supplies to millions of Indians. The EU's latest sanctions package names Nayara Energy among those targeted, citing concerns about Russian financial flows. But Nayara, in a strongly worded statement, says the decision is based on baseless assertions and ignores the fact that the company operates entirely under Indian law. The firm also reaffirmed its long-term commitment to India, announcing plans to invest 70,000 crore rupees in downstream infrastructure, including petrochemical and ethanol projects, retail expansion and ESG-linked initiatives. Nayara also noted that while several European countries continue to import Russian energy, the EU has chosen to target an Indian company that refines Russian crude largely for domestic consumption. The company insists it remains a reliable energy partner with no impact on its day-to-day operations. Remember, Rosneft holds a 49.13% stake in Nayara, while the remaining shares are owned by an investment consortium including Russian and European firms. Nayara has invested over 14,000 crore rupees in India since 2017 and employs more than 55,000 people across the country. Citing its mission in India for India, Nayara says it serves nearly 8% of India's refining capacity and continues to contribute to national energy security, tax revenue, as well as job creation. The company further said that it is actively exploring legal options to challenge the EU's move and has urged all stakeholders to uphold international law and respect India's sovereignty. India's national auditor, the Comptroller and Auditor General of CAG, has flagged major lapses in the union government's fiscal reporting. In a report tabled in Parliament on Monday, the CAG has pointed to multiple inconsistencies in the government's compliance with the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, raising questions about transparency and accountability in managing public finances. One of the major findings was unrealized tax revenues that surged to a staggering 21.3 trillion or 21.3 lakh crore rupees at the end of 2022-23. Now that's a jump of over 5.4 lakh crore rupees from the previous year. And what's more, concerns are that nearly 5.3 lakh crore rupees of that amount is not even under dispute, which means it was fully collectible but never recovered. The CAG also found conflicting figures across key fiscal documents. The union government finance accounts estimated the fiscal deficit at 17.56 lakh crore rupees for FY 22-23, while the budget at a glance for FY 24-25 showed a lower figure of just 17.38 lakh crore rupees, a gap of 18,000 crore rupees. Discrepancies were also found in interest arrears, loan advances and fiscal projections published in half-yearly and medium-term reports. Now, in the case of loans to state and union territory governments, the number didn't add up either. The receipt budget listed arrears at 1,705 crore rupees, while the finance accounts showed a much higher 4,867 crore rupees. That's a difference of over 3,100 crore rupees. Even estimates for non-tax revenues varied sharply from 2.7 lakh crore rupees in the medium-term fiscal policy to 5.76 lakh crore rupees in the annual financial statement. Now, despite these red flags, the CAG report did acknowledge some positives too. The central government's debt, which had spiked during the pandemic to over 61% of the GDP, fell to 57.93% by FY 22-23. The debt sustainability indicator was also reported to be in a healthy zone. However, the ratio of interest payments to revenue receipts rose marginally to 35.35%, which means over a third of the government's revenue goes just into paying interest. But in better news for the Indian economy, India has hit a historic employment milestone as the Employees Provident Fund Organization, or EPFO, has reported its highest ever monthly net addition, that is over 20 lakh members added in the month of May 2025. This is the biggest surge since EPFO began tracking payroll data in April of 2018. This 20 lakh figure represents a 4.79% jump from April this year and a 2.84% rise compared to May of last year. The Union Labour Minister Mansukh Mandavia called it a testament to Prime Minister Modi's pro-youth, pro-worker reforms and credited ease of doing business and inclusive growth for this formal employment boost. Now, over 9.4 lakh people joined the EPFO for the first time in the month of May. That's an increase of more than 11% from the month of April. A significant chunk of these new members, nearly 60%, came from the 18 to 25 age group, clearly reflecting the growing entry of young Indians into organized workforce. In addition, 16.11 lakh individuals rejoined the EPFO after exiting earlier, indicating increased job mobility while continuing within the formal employment net, which is a 14% year-on-year jump. Women's participation also saw a noticeable rise. Many recorded, and the month of May in fact recorded 2.62 lakh new female subscribers, while the overall net addition for women stood at 4.25 lakh, up 15% compared to the same period last year. Now, when it comes to state-wise performance, Maharashtra has led the way, accounting for over 20% of net payroll additions. Other top-performing states include Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat and Delhi, together making up nearly 60% of all new formal job additions in the country. And moving to the skies now, the recent Air India plane crash in Ahmedabad, which claimed several lives, has put a sharp focus on the safety standards of Indian aviation. As the sector deals with the aftermath of the tragedy, a series of troubling incidents has sparked concerns over flight safety, with technical issues leading to emergency landings, flight cancellations and many near misses. Now, from faulty baggage doors to malfunctioning landing gear and other technical glitches, the recent wave of incidents has left passengers unsettled and the aviation industry urgently searching for solutions. We bring you some of the recent incidents where aircraft were forced to make emergency landings, diversions or delays due to technical snags. Now, let's start first with what happened in a latest incident. An Air India flight flying in from Kochi had a close shave on Monday while landing in Mumbai after it veered off the rain-soaked runway. Pictures show a clump of grass stuck to the rear part of the aircraft and signs of damage on one of the engines. Sources indicate that 3 tires burst during the landing and the aircraft's engine may have been damaged. All passengers aboard the aircraft did get off safely. Indigo flight 6E813 from Goa's Dabalim Airport to Indore on July 21st reported a technical snag too related to its landing gear shortly before landing. The aircraft landed safely and mandatory checks were initiated before it could resume operations again. In another incident, an Air India flight from Delhi to Kolkata, which was scheduled to depart at 7:30 p.m. on July 21st, aborted takeoff due to a technical issue detected during the takeoff roll. The cockpit crew decided to discontinue the takeoff following standard operating procedures. An Indigo aircraft en route to Imphal returned to the national capital on July 17th due to a technical snag after being airborne for an hour. Another Indigo flight en route Lucknow from Chandigarh was cancelled on June 22nd after the pilot identified a technical issue during pre-flight checks, marking yet another instance of flight cancellations. Now on June 20th, an Indigo flight operating from Guwahati to Chennai with 168 passengers made an emergency landing at Bengaluru's Kempegowda International Airport after the pilot issues mayday distress call due to critically low fuel. The central government has now issued 9 show-cause notices to Air India in the past 6 months over 5 separate safety violations. Now, this was revealed by Minister of State for Civil Aviation Muralidhar Mohol in a written reply to the Rajya Sabha on Monday. So far, enforcement action has been completed in only one of these cases. The remaining are likely under review by the aviation regulator. Meanwhile, the minister also informed the House that 71 aircraft across different airlines were damaged at Indian airports during the first half of 2025. The main reasons were 511 bird strikes and 16 animal strikes. However, no injuries or deaths were reported in such incidents over the last 5 years. Now, as for Air India's safety record, the DGCA has conducted 3 audits of the airline in September 2020, March 2023 and again in March 2025. While no major lapses were found, the regulator did seek corrective action which were followed up with the airline. Between 2020 and 2025, the last 5 years, the DGCA also took enforcement steps in 3 complaints against Air India. These included a 30 lakh rupee fine, suspension of 3 licenses, withdrawal of 1 official's approval and 5 formal warnings. Well, time for a short break now, but coming up on the other side, we will bring you Eternal's Q1 results, where Blinkit has surpassed Zomato in its overall net order value, NOV. Also, we will bring you a mood check on the Lal Street as markets have just opened. What's in store for you, your trading day and your investments? Firoz Aziz will be here to help us understand and unpack that. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
एसोसिएट स्पॉन्सर डायना प्रीमियम ब्यूटी सोप, पहली झलक करे खूबसूरत।
ये रोशनी का सफर दिलचस्प है, दिलचस्प है।
हम सूरज से सिर्फ बिजली नहीं बनाते हैं, खुशहाली को देश के कोने कोने तक भी पहुंचाते हैं।
ये रोशनी का सफर
अदानी, हम करके दिखाते हैं।
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
Fresh air, the roof but different, the grill but different, the alloys but different, the seats but different. Different is in the XUV 3XO Rev X series, starting at rupees 8.94 lakh.
Birla Opus Paints.
Welcome back. Let's bring you all the market action that we're tracking for you today. Let's begin first with the U.S. At the Wall Street, the S&P 500 and NASDAQ ended at record highs on Monday, powered by gains in Alphabet and other tech mega caps. Investors are looking forward to a key earnings week and remain optimistic that trade deals could soften the economic fallout from U.S. President Donald Trump's global tariff push. Take a look at this detailed report.
A fairly muted Monday on Wall Street saw the Dow end essentially flat, the S&P 500 edge up fractionally, and the Nasdaq finish more than 0.33% higher. Still, the latter two indexes eked out more record-high closes thanks to gains in shares of Alphabet. The Google parent rallied more than 2.5% ahead of its quarterly report on Wednesday. Tesla also reports on Wednesday, with the two tech giants kicking off earnings from the so-called Magnificent Seven. Analysts on average expect S&P 500 companies to report a 6.7% increase in earnings for the second quarter, with big tech driving much of that gain, according to LSEG IBES. And that has Rob Hayworth, Senior Investment Strategy Director at U.S. Bank Asset Management Group, bullish on stocks.
On the market side, we are still glass half full, and that really comes from, one, a solid labor market. Two, corporate earnings are looking really fairly solid for the year. And three, inflation, even though it's elevated and may creep a little higher, is not threatening the consumer at this point. So we think this is an economy that can survive, and the markets appear to be doing that as well.
Other Monday movers included Verizon, which rallied over 4% after the telecommunications company boosted its annual profit forecast. Investors now turn their attention to a Tuesday speech by Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell for clues about when the central bank might cut interest rates.
All right, and from Wall Street, let's move to the Wall Street. Markets are continuing with their upward trend this morning as they open with a gap up. Nifty and Sensex both up marginally, in fact 0.2-0.3% or so up in trade after closing about 0.5% higher yesterday. As we speak, Nifty 50 is above the 25,100 levels and the Sensex is nearing the 82,500 odd levels, right now trading at about 82,434. The small cap and the mid-cap space is also similar. Small cap doing a little better, up more than 0.5% point at about 9:20 a.m. this morning. Let's move to the Nifty 50 heat map and try and make sense of which are the sectors where we are feeling the gains or some heat from. Well, Reliance, the heavyweight, continues to slide in trade. Even today, the stock is down about 0.4% after the loss that we saw in trade yesterday when the stock was down nearly 3% or so. So the pressure from EU on Russian oil refined in India exported to the EU, and despite the 78% rise in net profit, Reliance continuing to reel under pressure this morning as well. Meanwhile, the banking stocks, HDFC and ICICI Bank, that were both up about 2.2% and 2.8% respectively yesterday, are continuing with their upward trajectory. ICICI Bank is up about 0.5% and HDFC Bank about 0.33% higher in trade this morning. But the great news really is coming from Eternal, the Zomato parent company, which after Q1 results were announced yesterday, the stock went up almost 6%, and even this morning seems like it's hitting the upper circuit. The stock is up about 10% or so. Let's unpack all this with Feroz Aziz, the joint CEO of Anand Rathi, who joins us this morning. Feroz, good morning. Pleasure having you back with us here on News9. Help us understand the mood on the Wall Street this morning.
Good morning, Karthik. Like you read out, some nifty gainers have had astronomical gains as well. If you look at the market's mood, not on your channel but a couple of channels, it was very evident, is why I stated that the bounce back was imminent.
Yeah.
Of course, if you look at technical charts, they extrapolate what has happened. But some derivative indicators actually do the opposite. Yes, on Thursday, if you look at the Thursday expiry, when markets had breached 25,000 on the lower side, the index synthetic futures of 24th July were quoting at a 42 rupees premium.
All right.
Synthetic futures being at a premium implies that there is more shorting than needed. So there will be short covering.
All right.
So what do I mean by that is, if you look at the future Nifty now, let's assume it is at 25,100. The 24th July put, if you buy a call and sell a put, that's called a synthetic future long. The extra money over the spot price you pay is called the synthetic future premium.
All right.
This has to be 3 rupees per day. That's the implied cost of the premium. So the Thursday synthetic futures on paper technically should quote at 6 rupees. If it quotes at 30 rupees, that means there's more bullishness packed for this series.
All
so
right.
coming back to where the mood of the market is, I think it is at equilibrium for this expiry. Now it is quoting at about 8-9 rupees, Thursday's futures.
All right.
So I would say it's a little wait and watch kind of a expiry for the next 2 days left. But I think Nifty stocks, there are about 17, 18 stocks in Nifty who are above 50p and some of them further expanding their valuations as you suggest.
All right, Feroz. Well, we will wait for that Thursday data to see whether the bullish sentiment that you were talking about continues to come back into Indian markets or not. But staying with the derivative space, Feroz, help us understand. Market regulator SEBI has again this time allowed Jane Street, the US-based proprietary trading firm accused of market manipulation, to resume trading after the company has deposited the mandated 4,844 crore rupees in an escrow account. Now, while lifting the trading restrictions, SEBI said the entities involved have been directed to cease and desist from directly or indirectly engaging in any fraudulent, manipulative or unfair trade practice. Feroz, help us understand what really happened with Jane Street. Just simplify that for our viewers. How exactly did Jane Street manipulate markets? And what does SEBI's July 3rd order tell us about the proactive nature of the regulator?
Yes, Karthik. So let me break this down into what did Jane Street do. Jane Street basically did something which legally, to my mind, is not prohibited, but there were no limits to do it, and they had very deep pockets, and a computer can very easily calculate what losses do I have to make in the cash market. And if I were to be ready to make some losses in the cash market, what are the positions to be built in the derivative market to make 5 times the gain as much as the loss?
That's right.
So, all the word derivative comes from the fact that it derives its value from the underlying, which is in the cash market. So, if it's a derivative, the price of the derivative is dependent on cash market. So, what did Jane Street do is, it started building positions, long positions, on a certain stock. For example, it would have done the opposite as well.
Sure.
In a 1-year time frame, a high frequency trader would change its position every 2-3 minutes. Now, one of the positions one can take, which was described in the order, was that it built on one of the expiries, Bank Nifty. On that day, when HDFC incidentally had given their results, they had built the position of buy position on the stock. Over a period of a couple of hours. So if you're building and buying a stock in the cash market, parallelly, if you're building a buy put option, if you're buying a put option, it's as good as saying that I'm buying an insurance on HDFC.
That's right.
If HDFC were to go down, you would make money. So what it did was it went long in the cash market and went short by buying put options in the derivative market. And then when it was 2 o'clock or 1:30, couple of more hours for the expiry to happen, it actually dumped all its cash positions and lost a lot of money in the cash market. When the stock and Bank Nifty fell, the put options of 1 rupee went to 10 rupees. If it goes to 10 rupees, most of the stop loss orders get breached and they don't get executed. If they don't get executed, all the traders came to the terminal and started punching their buy orders of the put option. That's why the 10 rupee option, as per Black-Scholes, went to almost 100 rupees, for example. So you've bid 10 crore put options, you've made 1,000 crores here, you've lost 100 crores here, you net 900 positive. And if you get some good coincidental days like that, then making money between these two markets is what Jane Street did. And I think that's why regulator has given it an opportunity by making sure that it puts in 4,800 in an escrow, crores in an escrow, and then here's its case, more patient.
Right, but Feroz, like you mentioned, if what the derivative market does and this particular kind of manipulation, which SEBI calls it, is not technically illegal, what is stopping a firm like Jane Street to go ahead and play a similar game once again?
Karthik, see, that's my take. Whether it's illegal or legal, of course, the regulator knows it best. But now coming to, see, when you are in the derivative market, the basic qualification for a person to be in derivative market is to learn the Black-Scholes pricing model, which is a Nobel Prize winning model. What it does is it tells you what's the actual price of a certain option given the underlying parameters. So most of the traders in India or globally now who are retail investors don't understand valuation of options. It is like a fund manager. Let's assume there is a fund manager managing 40,000 crores of AUM. If you went and met him and asked him what is discounted cash flow, and if the guy said, I don't know what is discounted cash flow mechanism to value a stock, I would be surprised. I would withdraw all the money which I have entrusted him. But on the other hand, in derivatives, retailers they've not heard of Black-Scholes pricing model. What is delta of option? What is the gamma of the option? But people go into it. So coming back to your pointed question, can this happen again? Of course it can happen again. Should derivative participants at least have a basic idea of how options are priced? I think so, yes. So anybody who is not having the time to understand the derivative pricing model should not go into it, because the opponent has an unfair advantage of education, right? An option trader will go through a 2-year course understanding synthesizing of options before he steps on the terminal. But retailers are using it as more speculative instrument. And SEBI did that, right? It warned you 3 times saying that isme mat ghuso, samajhte nahi ho tum. But can happen, may not happen. But I'm so thrilled with our regulator, and after having met a few representatives, not second-hand information, they are so sharp. I'm amazed how sharp SEBI. My perception, unfortunately, was not right up there. But after a few meetings, I think that they understand derivatives. Whatever action they are taking, given the data and information they have, has to be 99% accurate, is my belief after having interacted.
All right, and on that Black-Scholes model, Feroz, I think we have to bring you back and do a masterclass on what exactly that means and how retail investors and traders should understand that model. But moving on for now to Zomato, the parent company Eternal, the food delivery and quick commerce firm Eternal, which owns Zomato and Blinkit. Its shares jumped nearly 6% yesterday, and the stock is up almost 10% today as well in early trade. Now, this emerged as the biggest gainer among the Sensex and Nifty firms both yesterday as well as today, after Eternal reported a consolidated net profit of 25 crore rupees for the June quarter, as continuing investments in quick commerce and going out businesses weighed down on its bottom line. Now, during the quarter under review, Eternal's revenue rose from 4,200 odd crore rupees to 7,167 crore rupees. And for once, we have seen that the net order value, or NOV, of quick commerce has exceeded that of food delivery. Now, the company's total expenses also jumped to 7,433 crore rupees from 4,203 crore rupees in the corresponding period of the previous fiscal. So the questions that we leave you with this morning are, has quick commerce really come of age, and profitability in startups, is that back on the table? Also, let's try and understand in greater detail perhaps that the move from marketplace to inventory holding model, something that Eternal has announced, is that going to impact its cash flows? And moving on to other stories that we are tracking, which may or may not have a direct impact on markets. Well, in fact, the SBI stock is more or less flat in trade this morning. But SBI, in a statement, said that the QIP of its equity shares has raised 25,000 crore rupees, the largest QIP ever executed in the capital markets. Now, the proceeds will be used for loan growth by the central bank, by the State Bank of India. Now, the book received a robust demand and was oversubscribed 4.5 times. Foreign investors accounted for 64.3% of the total demand. Now, in a separate filing, the Life Insurance Corporation of India, or LIC, said it has increased its shareholding in SBI's equity shares from 9.21% to 9.49%. And staying with SBI, but another story which we are tracking for you comes by way of the State Bank of India, which has reclassified Reliance Communications along with its promoter director Anil Dhirubhai Ambani as fraud, and is also in the process of lodging complaint with the CBI. This as per an information shared with Parliament on Monday. The entities were classified as fraud on June 13th, 2025, in accordance with RBI's Master Directions on Fraud Risk Management and Bank's board-approved policy on classification and reporting management of frauds. Minister of State for Finance Pankaj Chaudhary said this in a written reply in the Lok Sabha yesterday. Now, the credit exposure of SBI in RCOM includes fund-based principal outstanding amount of over 2,200 crore rupees, along with the accrued interest and expenses from 2016, plus non-fund-based bank guarantee of over 786 crore rupees. Now remember, RCOM is a penny stock which is trading at just a little over 1 rupee, but Reliance Infrastructure, largely on the basis of the robust order book of Reliance Infrastructure, is on an upward move. That stock has gained about 40% in the last 6 months. So the question really is, this new reclassification on RCOM and Anil Ambani with a fraud tag added to it, is this likely to impact Reliance Infrastructure, as it most likely will impact Reliance Communication? That's what we will be tracking for you right here on News9. And before we slip into another short break, let's look at the other global stories that we're tracking for you this morning. America's Harvard University urges federal court to lift freeze on $2.6 billion in research funding, claims Trump administration halted the money after the school refused to compromise academic freedom. The Trump administration is more concerned with the quality of trade agreements than their timing. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says ahead of an August 1st deadline for countries to secure trade deals or face steep tariffs. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent calls on the Federal Reserve to review its expanding role beyond monetary policy, warns unchecked activity could undermine the central bank's independence. British-Swedish drug maker AstraZeneca announces a $50 billion investment to expand its U.S. operations by the year 2030, aligns with President Donald Trump's push to bring drug production back onshore. Automaker Stellantis expects $2.7 billion loss for the first half of the year, blames restructuring costs and early impacts from Trump tariffs for the downfall. France's luxury cosmetics industry braces for a potential 30% US tariff. Brands warn that American consumers may reject higher prices, putting exports and the elite French touch at risk. Ukraine demands $6 billion to fill this year's defense procurement shortfall. Targets drones, air defense and long-range strike capabilities to fight Russian aggression. Iranian officials are set to meet Russian and Chinese counterparts on Tuesday to discuss its nuclear program amid threats of UN sanctions, with more talks set for Friday with EU and Western diplomats in Istanbul. At least 27 people killed and more than 170 injured after a Bangladesh Air Force training aircraft crashes into a school in Dhaka. Chief Advisor Mohammad Yunus calls it a national tragedy. We'll bring you these stories on the other side of the break. You're watching Morning Brief at 9 on News9.
एसोसिएट स्पॉन्सर एंकर टूथपेस्ट, नए जमाने की नई सुरक्षा।
ये रोशनी का सफर दिलचस्प है, दिलचस्प है।
हम सूरज से सिर्फ बिजली नहीं बनाते हैं, खुशहाली को देश के कोने कोने तक भी पहुंचाते हैं।
ये रोशनी का सफर
अदानी, हम करके दिखाते हैं।
Fresh air. The grill, but different. The alloys, but different. The sunroof, but different. The seats, but different. Different is in the XUV 3XO Rev X series, starting at rupees 8.94 lakh.
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
A deep dive into what matters to you the most. Angles you won't find anywhere else. News that impacts your life.
Women in West Bengal should be assured that it is a safe place for them, because justice should be done, served cold, quickly, and it should be done in a way that it is transparent. Peace and prosperity cannot coexist with terrorism and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction in the hands of terror groups. These visuals are the most defining moment when India's defense minister called out China's bluff. The memories of emergency have again become very, very relevant. There is no excuse. It subverted our constitution.
A small window of hope has opened for Nimisha Priya. You know, human beings live by hope. Is Vijay challenging Dravidian party? Payments have been made, but no books inside. If there is corruption at the BO office, maybe I want to learn Hindi, that I do not know how to speak Kannada. Go to the second part.
We don't want to have Hindi compulsion.
2 kids were asked to clean the toilet because of their caste. All these kids were forced to do it. I will clearly protest against this. 3 passes, Mr. Gowda. People rushed. I'm asking you, what makes Palaniswamy so confident? We are sitting on moral boulders. Tamil Nadu seems to have become extremely unsafe.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9 right here on News9. On to stories from around the world now. Harvard University has asked a U.S. federal judge on Monday to lift the freeze on $2.6 billion in research funding, arguing that Trump administration cut off the money after America's oldest and most prestigious Ivy League university refused directives from the U.S. president, it says, would compromise academic freedom. But a lawyer from the Trump administration defended the move, saying the grants were pulled as part of a broader push to stop federal funding to institutions accused of anti-Semitism. Now, the legal fight underscores rising tensions between White House and Harvard, which came under fire earlier this year for rejecting Trump's demands to change its governance, hiring, and admissions practices. Now, outside the courthouse, demonstrators rallied in support of Harvard, holding signs of defending academic freedom. As part of Trump's new tax and spending law, Congress has sharply raised the federal excise tax on Harvard's $53 billion endowment from 1.4% to as high as 8%. Now, that endowment accounts for 40% of the university's operating budget. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Monday urged the Federal Reserve to undergo a comprehensive review of its expanding activities outside monetary policy, warning that mission creep, which is the expansion of the central bank's activities and goals beyond its traditional mandate of maintaining price stability and maximum employment, could undermine the institution's independence. In a post on X, Bessent said the Fed's credibility is being threatened by involvement in areas beyond its mandate, opening it to justifiable criticism that clouds its essential role in managing interest rates and inflation. He also questioned the Fed's decision to undertake a major building renovation despite ongoing operating losses and called for a review, though he stopped short of saying who should lead it. British-Swedish pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca announced on Monday it will invest $50 billion to expand its U.S. operations by the year 2030, marking one of the biggest pharma build-outs yet in response to President Donald Trump's push for more domestic drug production. The investment includes a major new manufacturing site in Virginia and expanded R&D and cell therapy capacity across 5 U.S. states. The company said the move aligns with its goal to hit $80 billion in annual revenue by 2030, with half of that coming from the U.S., which already accounts for more than 40% of its global sales. The decision follows Donald Trump's renewed calls for drug makers to produce more medicines within the United States as he threatens to slap tariffs on pharmaceutical imports. Automaker Stellantis said on Monday that it expects to post a $2.7 billion loss for the first half of the year, citing restructuring expenses and the early impact of U.S. tariffs under the Trump administration. The automaker said these combined pressures have significantly hurt the company's profitability. More details in this next report.
Peugeot owner Stellantis predicts a $2.7 billion loss in the first half of 2025. That's as it faces restructuring costs and the initial impact of US tariffs. The automaker estimated on Monday these import tariffs would have cost it almost $350 million due to lower shipments and production costs as the company adjusted manufacturing levels to the trade duties. It also booked $3.8 billion in pre-tax net charges for the first half for its cancelled vehicle programs. The automaker, which owns brands including Fiat and Jeep, said its North America shipments were down 25% year-on-year in the second quarter. One analyst said the automaker's results were worse than consensus, despite poor figures being anticipated. Stellantis' preliminary first-half results contrast with a $6.5 billion net profit a year earlier, underscoring the carmaker's ongoing struggle and the challenge for new CEO Antonio Filosa, who was appointed in May. The carmaker's shares fell 2% in early trade and are down 37% since the start of the year.
The French luxury beauty sector is on edge as the U.S. threatens a 30% tariff on European imports. Industry leaders fear American consumers may be unwilling to pay a premium for French cosmetics, putting exports as well as the appeal of the French touch in fashion at a greater risk. Here's a report.
US threats of 30% tariffs on imports from the EU have left France's beauty industry reeling, prompting questions over how much of a premium Americans will pay for the French touch. In 2024, beauty exports to the US from France were worth over $3.4 billion, the industry's union FEBEA said. This represented about 12% of all French exports. Perfume made up over half of the industry's overseas orders, according to the union, with 1 in 5 perfumes sold abroad bought by American customers. Anne-Marie Gabellica, founder of brand Illusion, said 30% tariffs would deprive the industry of an enormous client base.
For
French cosmetics brands, exports are an essential outlet. It's not always easy to imagine, but some French brands are basically only sold outside France. That needs to be understood.
The US export market was growing, but momentum will be undermined if US President Donald Trump's 30% tariff threat is realised. That's if a trade deal between Washington and the EU is not reached by August the 1st. For FEBEA, the impact on the French economy of 30% levies would be dramatic. The union's head said, according to economists, it could lead to the loss of thousands of jobs.
Ukraine needs $6 billion to close its defense procurement shortfall this year, Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal said on Monday in an online session with the Ukraine Defense Contract Group, co-chaired by Germany's Boris Pistorius, the UK Defense Secretary John Haley, and the meeting focused on Kyiv's urgent needs in its conflict with Russia. Shmyhal said the funds would go towards drone production, boosting air defenses and launching deeper strikes into Russian-held territory. Listen in.
My first request related to the urgent procurement of the US weapons for Ukraine. Air defense, especially Patriot and PAC-3 missiles, along with ammunition, are crucially important to us. This night, another one, massive combined attack, 24 missiles, 426 drones, battle drones, attacked Ukraine civilian objects. My second request is for financial support. Ukraine needs $6 billion to close this year's procurement gap. This will allow us to build more FPV drones to hold the line, more interceptor drones to counter Shahid attacks, and additional deep strike weapons to take the war back to Russia.
Iranian officials will meet their Russian and Chinese counterparts on Tuesday to discuss its nuclear program and looming threats of renewed international sanctions under the UN snapback mechanism, according to Iranian Foreign Ministry. Iran's deputy foreign ministers are also set to hold further talks with Britain, France, Germany and EU diplomats in Istanbul later on Friday to seek explanations for why the European parties have not condemned recent Israeli and US military strikes on Iranian targets. At least 27 people, including children, were killed and more than 170 injured after a Bangladesh Air Force training jet crashed into a school and college campus in Dhaka on Monday. The F-7 BGI aircraft had taken off shortly after 1 p.m. local time before slamming into Milestone School and College in the capital's northern area. Eyewitness footage shows smoke rising from the crash site as onlookers gathered nearby. The crash severely damaged part of the building's exterior, including its walls and iron grills. Bangladesh's chief advisor Mohammad Yunus extended his condolences and called the incident a moment of deep sorrow for the nation. And moving on now, China's electric vehicle brands Zeekr and Neta are under scrutiny for allegedly inflating sales figures to meet aggressive monthly and quarterly targets. Reports say the companies booked sales early using China's car registration system to create the appearance of stronger demand. Take a look.
Chinese electric vehicle brands Zeekr and Neta inflated sales to hit aggressive targets. That's according to documents reviewed by Reuters and interviews with dealers and buyers. Documents from recent years show both companies arranged for cars to be insured before they were sold to buyers. This enabled them to book sales early under Chinese industry car registration practices, so they could hit monthly and quarterly targets, sources said. Documents show Neta used this method for over 64,000 cars, more than half of vehicles sold from January 2023 to March 2024. Meanwhile, premium EV brand Zeekr used the same method to book early sales in late 2024, Reuters interviewees said. Vehicles booked as sold before reaching a buyer are called zero-mileage used cars in the Chinese auto industry. The practice has emerged out of cutthroat competition for sales in the world's largest auto market. The industry faces a moment of reckoning, with state media calling out the zero-mileage car practice. Meanwhile, China's cabinet has pledged to regulate irrational competition.
And that's all we have for you on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. Thank you so much for watching, but news continues right here on News9, so stay tuned.
ये रोशनी का सफर दिलचस्प है, दिलचस्प है।
हम सूरज से सिर्फ बिजली नहीं बनाते हैं, खुशहाली को देश के कोने कोने तक भी पहुंचाते हैं।
ये रोशनी का सफर
अदानी।